Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to look at startling new final footage of Gabby and Brian. What does it mean? What can we tell from the body language? And how does it actually shift the timeline and possibly extend our knowledge base on what likely played into the final moments on August 27 last year? Now, the astonishing thing about this footage is that it comes almost to the day on the anniversary when Brian Laundrie's remains were found. That was on the 22nd of October last year. We sort of 4 days away from that anniversary. There's also a strange parallel to the Kylie Rodney case where after a period of time, a window of time, additional CCTV footage comes out. Well, in this case, what does it mean? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. The first thing to notice in this footage is how cold Brian is towards Gabby. The couple who were engaged at the time don't appear in this final footage on the day before, right before Gabby's death, the day of her death. In fact, hours before Gabby's murder. They don't seem to be friendly to one another at all. They don't appear to look at each other, talk to each other, or even touch each other. There is no hand-holding. In this zoomed-in image of the couple entering the Wyoming Whole Foods store, there's clearly something wrong. Gabby's walking with her arms folded. She's looking down, not because she's cold. Brian is walking a foot or two in front of Gabby, not by her side. And once inside the store, Gabby walks in front of him. And you can tell there's a palpable tension in the air between these two. Emotions are high and emotions are raw. We'll return to that aspect in a moment. Now let's deal with the timeline. In terms of the timeline, we now have additional context showing Gabby and Brian didn't simply head home after the Mary Piglets incident. Some have speculated that she may have been killed immediately after the unpleasant incident at the Mary Piglets. And you'll notice in the Fox News article that they refer to a profiler that said that incident triggered him. Now, although I think that played into everything, I think if it triggered him, you would imagine that immediately after the Mary Piglets, when they went to the camp, that she died. And I think there was the assumption that when the door opens, Gabby had already died at that point. I disagree. I think it was triggering. I don't think it was the primary trigger. I think there was a slow burn taking place. So to connect the Mary Piglets to what happened at the campsite, I think is like 1 + 1 = 2. It's oversimplifying, it's reductionist. And I think this video at the Wyoming Whole Foods store gives you a sense of the nuance, that it wasn't just anger, go from the restaurant, go to the campsite, and then the next thing happens. That's trying to connect one dot to another, right? And you can see there's some nuance here. There is Gabby looking vulnerable. There's Brian also looking in a way quite insecure, looking like an appendage as he sort of walks around kind of aimlessly behind Gabby, right? I do think Brian had felt undermined at the Mary Piglets, and so we are now seeing the aftermath to that. They just had a kind of another incident, another argument in a way, and now you're seeing the immediate aftermath in this visit to the Whole Foods store. Now, according to the Fox News article by Michael Ruiz showing the latest CCTV footage, quote, Petito's distinctive white Ford Transit van pulling into the parking lot at around 2:11 p.m., shortly after the couple left the Mary Piglets Tex-Mex restaurant in town following a public argument between Laundrie and the 3 female restaurant staffers. A seemingly irate Laundrie left and returned to the restaurant 4 times before Petito apologized. So what you kind of see there is Laundrie was irate, Petito was apologizing. That's what immediately preceded this visit to the Whole Foods store. And you kind of get the sense that Brian now needs to apologize to Gabby, and that Gabby is now angry or upset, and Brian needs to apologize, right? The restaurant separately acknowledged the couple ate there on that day. That's also from the article. The article goes on to say, shortly after leaving the eatery, the couple can be seen on video pulling into the grocery store parking lot, end quote. Now, from their body language, it does look and feel like Gabby and Brian have just had an argument, doesn't it? Just minutes before this footage, he was angry and she was apologetic. That is a mirror image for the Moonflower incident going into the Moab stop. There, Brian was angry, leading to Gabby being apologetic. We saw that in the raw footage from the Moab incident. Gabby's apologetic. She quite often says she's sorry. Interestingly, Brian also does. He also says that he's sorry. But Gabby is far more apologetic. But you can see those emotions here once again. Gabby's got her arms folded. And you may remember during the Moab incident, she also has her arms folded, holding onto 2 bottles of water at one point. So, in a very basic way, Brian is angry. He's still angry when this is happening. And Gabby is scared. Brian's hands are in his pockets. What does that mean? Notice Gabby doesn't have her hands in her pockets. If she did, what would that mean? A woman with her hands in her pockets, you sometimes see in fashion photography, used to denote being relaxed and comfortable. A man with his hands in his pockets may be the same thing, but when it's the whole time, when he keeps plunging his hands into his pockets, it's insecurity. Brian feels small and closed in. The hat and the glasses reinforce the sense of not wanting to be seen or to speak, putting up a barrier. In general, a criminal walking with hands in pockets, including hoodie pockets, may be concealing a weapon. Brian's weapons on this day, and likely later that night, at the campsite, were his hands. Hands in pockets in this situation, walking with his fiancée, may mean there is an unwillingness to trust, or that he's simply closed off to her and to others. Hands are an expressive part of the body, the face as well, that reveal thoughts and feelings. Brian has closed off both of those areas, face and hands. Brian's hands are hidden away, buried in his pockets, and he's likely feeling churning emotions that he's not only trying to suppress but also hide. Notice how even in the footage inside the store, Brian still has his hands in his pockets, but once inside, Gabby's slightly in front of him. She takes the initiative. Does it look like Brian has his wallet in those trouser shorts? Well, who's going to be paying for their supplies? Throughout the final footage, we can see Brian is clearly playing second fiddle to Gabby. She walks in front in the store, decides what they will buy. At one point, standing in front of a row of refrigerators, it seems like he takes his hand out of his pocket and appears to say something. But Gabby abruptly turns around and walks down into another aisle. You can obviously watch that footage from the Fox News article. I'll put a link to that in the description. They don't appear to buy any alcohol. Do they buy coffee or cheese? I think they do buy cheese. Is she actually seen buying anything? What do they buy? It's also interesting to me that they are in a store and almost everyone around them have masks on, but they don't. Even when they exit, Gabby is carrying all the food and Brian still has his hands in his pockets. Don't you get a sense that right beside Brian's anger is insecurity? And part of this insecurity is not just emotional, but financial. Brian feels powerless, helpless, and not in control. He's also losing his social status every time he makes a blunder. But in terms of the store, he's a mere passenger in the shopping excursion because he has no money. When they arrive back at the van, Brian doesn't open the back of the van for Gabby to place the supplies inside. Instead, he walks his own driver's door and gets in. It may seem as if Gabby actually appears to follow him to his door until she realizes is not going to be helping her. But in reality, the moment they pass another white van, both split up and head to other sides of the vehicle. The couple sit inside the van for 20 minutes. What are they doing? Talking, eating, arguing. Is there some sort of incident that occurs then? Doubtful. So once again, you can see that it's not quite as simple as they have an argument at the store. This is a triggering thing. It was triggering, but there was also an interlude where there were other thoughts and emotions that took place. Were they eating? It's also interesting that in this footage, is the black tarp still on top of the van? One can also imagine that Gabby isn't happy, but once back at the campsite, this mutual coldness that we see in the final footage, the mutual silent treatment, will erupt. How will it erupt? Well, in raw, fiery emotions, and both of them giving one another a piece of their minds. In that moment, Brian would feel if he didn't have the skills or social power to charm Gabby, to keep Gabby, or the finances to provide for her, he could take control of her in other ways, physically. Well, what would Gabby think about that? What would Gabby feel about that? Now let's go back to the timeline. We can say now with some degree of certainty that Gabby was still alive just before 3 p.m. on August 27th. But what happened after this footage? If we assume that they drove straight back to camp, they would have arrived there at around 3:20 or 3:30 p.m., mid-afternoon. Since Brian and Gabby were on none too friendly terms at the store, one can imagine that dynamic continuing for several hours longer. What would Brian be doing during those hours? What would Gabby be doing? More than likely, Gabby would be on her phone looking at social media while Brian sulked. There was nothing else to do. They were at a campsite. They'd just eaten. Their van life journey right at that moment was hanging in the balance, and Brian was feeling unwelcome in it, powerless every time he tried to show his power. Probably the future of not only their van life adventure but their relationship was argued about in a remote area in the wilderness, and probably Brian didn't like what he was about to hear. He'd been primed for this at Moab, at the Merry Piglets, on social media, and now here. Perhaps this time Gabby didn't back down, didn't apologize, and Brian, more unhinged than ever, took those big, clumsy hands out of his pockets and took matters into his own hands to make sure she did. So I'm not going to take it further than that. You can watch all the footage at the link provided in the description. If you guys want me to continue looking at the Lifetime movie, what we take out of that, let me know. I started that analysis, but I haven't yet completed it. So if you are interested in that, let me know. If you aren't, also let me know. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.